I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Wisconsin Public Radio had a really good interview with Jenna Friedman. They said, you come across as very fearless on stage. You're not afraid if the joke doesn't land. Your comedy's been described as confrontational. Is that how you see it? Jenna said, I don't know. I always joke about what I find interesting or funny or absurd or what makes me angry. I'm not trying to shock people. But I will say there's one specific joke in the show that's a joke about miscarriage, and miscarriage is a sensitive issue. But as I've gotten older, a lot of my friends have gone through it. And I think because there's such a stigma around it, when it happens to you, you feel even more alone because you don't realize how common it is. And I did that joke before I was pregnant. And it definitely got groans, but people laughed. Then doing that joke being visibly pregnant, the audience is so much more uncomfortable. And I think because I knew the joke worked when I wasn't pregnant, it gave me the confidence to tease and bait the audience because I knew that the reaction was really just because they were looking at me and judging me for being pregnant as opposed to actually taking in the joke and enjoying the joke. The joke as delivered by Friedman in her special Lady Killer. In Indiana, there's a law where they want women to miscarry to have to bury the goop, and there's no word for the byproducts of conception, so let's just call it Gwyneth Paltrow's lifestyle brand. Jenna said, I think it came from more of a place of what do I want to say, and it's taken a lot longer for that to resonate with people, but when it does, it's even more rewarding personally. Spokesman.com caught up with John Caparulo, he of Blue Collar The Next Generation. Remember that happened? That happened. I was there. I saw it. I hung out with Bill Engvall backstage in Atlanta while Blue Collar The Next Generation happened. Wasn't a tremendous success, I gotta say, but Caparulo was one of the guys on that group. One of Cap's famous bits is every time I go in a restaurant, I hear, what would you like to drink? And they say, can I have a Coke? And the waitress says, is Pepsi okay? And then I say, no, is Canadian money okay? As soon as I thought of that joke, I got giddy. The bit is so simple, but it's based on something that really ticks me off. It's crazy. It's petty and ridiculous, but it sets me off. When I do that bit, the audience gets behind me like we're at a political rally, but we're all just ticked off about soda pop. My daughter recently said that Pepsi and Coke taste the same, and I said, no, they don't. Are you trying to tick me off? But things are good with us. She loves playing video games and has created Frogger. His daughter's name is Madden, named after Madden football, Cap said. She has a cool name. She likes it. She's named after a guy who changed the way football is telecast. Baseball would be really interesting if it were football. I threw out the first pitch in Washington, D.C., and had great seats, and I left after the third inning. I can't get into it. I can watch baseball documentaries, but not baseball. Does he want to get into film or TV? I'm fine the way things are now. Early in my career, I got one of those sitcom deals. I did this bit about working a golf course. I got a deal, but then some executive saw School of Rock and thought it'd be a good idea if the kids were part of the show. How does that work with a foul-mouthed guy on a golf course? It didn't. Caparulo claims that Bill Maher stole a joke from him. He said, Bill Maher ripped off a bit I did about deer hunting. It's about how a friend said I should go deer hunting. It'll change my life. It's an amazing sport. And I said, for something to be called a sport, both teams should know that it's a game. Bill Maher ripped it off verbatim, says Cap. One of his writers must have seen me at a club and gave him the joke that drove me nuts since I was a lot younger when that happened. When you come up with something good, it's like a piece of gold. You develop it and you hone it, and you can't help but get mad when someone steals your material. That's the business. Quinta Brunson told The Hollywood Reporter she would like to work with Mindy Kaling. I feel like people are sleeping on her. If she were a man, people would never stop talking about her. What she's doing is really hard to pull off. Never Have I Ever has a K-pop level stardom around it, and The Sex Lives of College Girls is just a really good effing show that people can't wait to come back. I really admire Jordan Peele's career for just making the leap to a whole other genre and killing it. I don't know if I'd necessarily want to do it, but it's inspiring what he did. I love people who inspire me to feel if I ever want to change my mind, I can. I think what he's proved big time, especially as a sketch person, it's not that you need the proof, but it's nice to see someone do it. Kevin Hart was on a podcast, and the host asked him if he has to be more careful with the jokes he makes in the world of cancel culture. Kevin said, absolutely. Let's be honest. I think there were a lot of changes that were needed and necessary, right? I think being aware is something we should all prioritize. Just being aware, we're learning to better understand each other, and in doing so, respect should be attached to that. Now, there's a heightened level of sensitivity. There's a heightened level of opinion in today's time because social media has presented the world with a bunch of platforms that people can express themselves and how they feel. So now the things we didn't hear on a regular basis, you're hearing. The conversations you may not have been aware of, well, you're hearing because they're happening in real time. That said, we can't lose the idea of laughing at ourselves. If everything is deemed bad once it's done, there's no other thing you can do because you did the thing and that's it for you. Well, what the hell? You have to make the mistakes to learn and to basically have real life examples of what you're supposed to grow from. I'm going to do a little housekeeping here. If that doesn't interest you, hit skip like 2 minutes. So my legacy career is radio broadcasting. And back in the 90s, I was the producer of a show. Dr. Joy Brown was the host. And once a month, we used to do a reset and just explain to the listeners who Joy was and how the show worked. I thought I'd continue that tradition and do it here because a lot of new listeners to the show. So am I a stand-up comedian? I get asked that a lot. Nope, never done it, never been on stage, not even once, never tried. Don't think I'm a comedian, not trying to be funny. So where this podcast comes from is, let's start at the beginning. I did 10 years of hardcore talk radio in New York City, including producing Joy and doing a lot of political talk. After that, I found myself at Sirius XM running the comedy channels. They wanted somebody who knew radio more than comedy. I took the gig and I quickly learned that comedy radio is basically music radio, and the secret there is play the hits. So I had a really good 10-year run at Sirius XM. When that ended, I started working at what was called Slacker Radio and is now called Live One, and I host a show there. It's called The Weekly Comedy Thing, new episodes every Sunday. And on that show, it's kind of the forerunner of this, not kind of, it is, with short little news stories, and then I play the clip by the comedian. And I found that I had so much left over, I decided to start this podcast. So much like somebody who might program a rock station doesn't mean that they're Eddie Van Halen on the guitar, same thing here. I have studied a lot of comedy. I understand it, and I explain to people, I know more about stand-up comedy than 99% of the population. However, the other 1% that is groaning right now, you guys know a lot more than me. If you're an actual comic, you know so much more than me. If you're out on the road, you know so much more than me. But if we go to the bar and we start talking stand-up, I'm the local expert. So that's where I come from, and that's what this show is, 7 days a week. There are a couple ways to support the show. One is go to buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews, and they'll put some options in front of you. Most people throw $5 in the tip jar. Much appreciated. You can also become a premium subscriber to the podcast. What does that mean? Go on Apple Podcasts. They'll put it under your nose. For $5 a month, you'll get the episodes ad-free, and you'll get them early. I usually put them up on Apple about 4 p.m. the night before the official release, and I almost always do the weekend episodes in advance, so I can hang out on the weekend like you do. So I usually make the weekend episodes available on Friday. Love connecting with you on social media. All the socials are in the description notes for this episode, and I've been pushing the YouTube channel, trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers for some additional monetization, so when you're on YouTube, type in Daily Comedy News, hit subscribe. That'll really help me out. All right, so you can do that, or buymeacoffee.com/dailycomedynews, or go to Apple Podcasts, become a premium subscriber. Jeff Dunham talked to Decider about his character Peanut being the voice of criticism against Jeff Dunham. Peanut says that my act is racist and blah, 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 whatever anybody says all the time. I make fun of that, and I don't think I defend it. I think I just make more fun of the fact that everybody thinks I'm racist. I don't think I'm racist. I think I've created characters that are caricatures of certain walks of life and certain people. But there's never any jokes about those groups putting them down. I mean, Bubba Jay's this redneck guy. It's being celebrated as being a redneck. Old people don't get upset that I'm making fun of old people with Walter. It's just kind of celebrated and people laugh at it. Terrorism? Yeah, I'm not celebrating terrorism, but I do celebrate the fact that Ahmed has fallen in love with the Western culture. He loves the movies. He loves the cars. He loves the rock and roll. So that's the way Ahmed works now. He's certainly not what he was 10 years ago. Jim Carrey revealed he almost did a follow-up to Bruce Almighty, which would have been called Brucifer. In Brucifer, he wouldn't have had the powers of God, he would have had the powers of the devil. The problem was they made Evan Almighty, starring Steve Carell as his character from Bruce Almighty. That movie was a critical and financial failure. They still kind of tried to develop Brucifer. The plot would have involved Bruce's wife, Grace, played by Jennifer Aniston, to pass away and cause Bruce to lose his faith in God. Beelzebub, played by Morgan Freeman, or possibly by Jim Carrey in a cost-saving move, would then tempt Bruce with a different set of powers to create the world Bruce felt he deserved after all he had done. Down serious, it would have still been a comedy. Jennifer Aniston would have come back as a decaying zombie for most of the movie. In the end, Jim Carrey's Brucifer would end up learning a valuable life lesson, blah, blah, blah. Sounds like it would have been a train wreck. Chuck Lorre is the producer behind a lot of sitcoms, most of the CBS sitcoms. He's got an undeveloped idea. It's called Sex, Drugs, and a Sitcom. It's a TV pilot script that opens with, the following is a true story, except for cutting the boring stuff and making up a bunch of stuff. This is what really happened. The script was obtained by The Hollywood Reporter, dated June 15th, 2022. It opens up with Martin Sheen being interviewed by Matt Lauer on NBC's Today Show. A Chiron identifies Matt Lauer as NBC News anchor back when he was still getting laid at work. Wow. The pilot then goes back in time 9 years before it all turned into a septic cluster F to tell the story of how 2.5 men came into existence. The Hollywood Reporter says, casting would have been interesting, given that the pilot's real-life characters include a bevy of stars and flashback scenes from such previous Chuck Lorre series as Roseanne, Sybil, Grace Under Fire, Dharma and Greg, plus some famous people like CBS boss Les Moonves. The Chiron called him the most powerful man in television and a naughty, naughty boy. Wow, this isn't getting made. I got news for you, Chuck. It's not known who Chuck Lorre would have wanted to play himself, though on-screen text at the end makes it clear how he wants to be characterized. Chiron says, in this telling of the story, Chuck Lorre is portrayed as witty and sympathetic. There's another version where he's arrogant and insecure. Somebody else can write that one. Sounds amazing, but it's never going to happen. And that's your comedy news for today. All right, I told you how to follow the show, right? Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube channel. You heard that 2-minute rap in the middle of the show, so I'll shut up. See you tomorrow.